design needs to be solved based on a need and based on some value that it brings. I use a simple description for innovation. And each word in that description, if it can be measured, that the total will be a measure of success. Design is something new, specific to a context and time that can add value to the user, the provider, the society and the environment.
Hello and welcome to Design Darshan. I'm Srividhya.
And I'm Bhaiji.
Today we're seated with Mr. Vijay Kumar. So to start off, of course, we have your book right here. I would like to ask you if you could go back and give your younger self a book, which one do you think it would be and why?
Other than my book, right?
Yes. It could be your own, honestly.
Yeah, there's another book that I really like a lot is what's called 10 Types of Innovation. I don't know whether you have seen that. That's a great book which classifies innovations under 10 types, and is a wonderful framework that any innovator can use to combine the different types and create new innovations. So that's very useful as a framework, and then it is very credible because the 10 types that are discussed there in the book are very clear, obvious, and you can combine them in any which ways. You can analyze companies based on those 10 types. You can analyze industries based on the types of innovation that they are doing. You can look at the evolution of industries over time by looking at how the 10 types of innovation has evolved. So those are the things that I like a lot, which attracts me to that book.
And did that book help you while you were coming up with your own methodologies?
Yes. The thing is that when the 10 types of innovation was developed, I was part of that at Dublin when I was consulting. So I was the team lead who started the 10 types of innovation development. After that, after I left the company, they continued to work on it and they published a book afterwards. So I have that personal attachment to the book as well. So when they were developing the book, of course, initially I was part of it fully. But later on, when they were developing, I was contributing as an external person.
And people often consider designers and innovators as synonyms for each other. And as designers, we're often, we are told that we need to find something and we need to develop it, find a solution for it. What is one example or one problem you see that is bursting with a need for a design solution specifically?
Interesting. So I would pick on any of the social problems. Right? So a lot of the projects that I have been doing recently have been socially relevant projects, beyond products and communications or apps and things like that. That I think has much more value in terms of impact, in terms of the kind of effect design thinking has on the world. If you can really affect the community around you, the society around you through design process, it can be very powerful. So any socially relevant problem would be very attractive.
Right. We've also really noticed that social problems, designers are moving towards social spheres rather than a corporate environment.
Right, yeah.
But I had a question for you. So there are methodologies that you've developed and that have been developed and coming up over the past few years.
Right.
These were suited for corporate environments and for developing solutions for corporate environments. Do you think these same methodologies are still relevant when people are moving towards social spheres?
Right. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, some of these methods are so generic.
Yes.
There's not that it can be applied only to corporate environments. Right. They're so generic. They're a generic way of thinking, right? So it is equally applicable to socially relevant projects as well. For example, insights, let's say insights, right? How to extract insights out of people, right? That can be applied for product development for a company. Same time, that can be applied to reducing shooting and violence.
You're right.
Yeah. I feel like that's something we noticed in the projects we did as well, where everyone was essentially using the same methods.
Correct.
But all of our project topics and our areas of interest were so varied, but it just worked for each context. And what we came up with in the end was pretty different from
Very different, yes, exactly.
For example, I did something about the financial situation of auto drivers, whereas you did.
Yeah, we focused on a small eatery near us
Right.
and how to bring their business back.
Right.
But we were all.
We were the same message.
Exactly. We were introduced to the double diamond before. There's a
yeah.
tire situation. We went Andreas and Mark.
Right.
So we thought that that was very interesting. And when talking to like our classmates, a lot of people did focus on using the same methodology.
Right, yeah. That's the idea. That's the idea. That's the value of making method generic and applicable to many situations. It has got much more value than producing one thing that will work for one situation, right?
So, speaking of design education, I wanted to know your thoughts on where you think it is headed in the future and how it's different now compared to when you were a student.
Right. So when I was a student, early design education was really about making small improvements, whether it is performance improvements or aesthetic improvements on a product or a communication piece. It is very narrowly defined that way, right? But over time, it became much broader, right? Design went away from that narrow focus to a broader focus. It can be used in your life, even changing your own life, your career planning, or not really a product or a system that you're designing. It can be applied to anything that you actively do, right? So that's the extreme way of looking at the broadening of define.
Yeah, I feel like definitely a lot of us, when we came into college, we had a much narrower understanding of what design was.
Yeah, I thought it was just UI, UX design, but I came over here and I spoke to all of these activists and I realized that there's so much more to it.
Right.
And how it can be applied in so much more than we think it can.
I think it is does, yeah, exactly.
But also having worked in both developing and developed countries,
Right.
in design specifically, what exactly are the differences in both opportunities and threats and all of that stuff? Is there a difference? And do you prefer a certain market?
No, I don't prefer it. The world is diverse, right? We have to respect that. It's a bit strange to even categorize developed countries and developing countries. That pattern is also changing, right? Developing countries have become developed from the point of view, but certain countries like where the design thinking or design activity is happening for a long time, they had the benefit of creating much more credible processes, credible examples. For example, in USA, when you talk about design, there's so many companies that follow design, and you can easily talk about, let's say, Apple, iPhone, for example, right? You can take it as an example and talk about design behind it in very clear terms because it went through a credible process and it is all well understood. Whereas in certain other countries, you don't have examples like that to talk about, right? The design is much more sort of fluid and dynamic, and not many strict frameworks on or structured processes that people have followed in certain developing countries, if you want to say it that way, right? Say for example, so small community level innovations. Like water pumping, for example, pumping water from the field to another location. That may be a community level project where the design happens very organically. They don't follow very structured methodologies, right? So that's the difference in terms of the developing countries where less number of strict structured processes happen versus developed countries where everything is much more protocol oriented and structured.
So a few days ago, one of our academic fellows asked us a question that I wanted to pose in front of you. What does success in design mean for you?
one keyword I would use is impact. Impact, how much of impact that design has on the world, whether it is the user or the provider. So I use, not least impact, let me broaden it up a little bit. I use a simple description for innovation. And each word in that description, if it can be measured, that the total will be a measure of success, in my opinion. For example, design is something new that you create that adds value to the user, that is people, the provider, the society, and the environment. Simple definition. Design is something new that you create that can add value to the user, the provider, the environment, and the society. But let me add one more aspect to it. Specific to a context and time. Design is something new, specific to a context and time that can add value to the user, the provider, the society, and the environment.
So designers need to deal with the concept that you're not going to see impact automatically. It's going to take a while for the effect to come.
Right.
How do designers really deal with this entire
Right,
concept?
yeah. So if you can use the description of design as a way to measure innovations by measuring each of the words in the description, like how new it is, how much of creative activity that gone into producing that innovation, specific to a context. Does it fully fit with the context, or there are some problems? And time, does it belong to that particular time, or is it too early to be introduced or too late, right? Time, and adds value to the user, right? How much of value does that particular innovation is adding to the person using it? You can measure it somehow, right? And the provider, how much of value it is bringing to the company or organization producing it, whether it is return on investment or monetary value, you can measure that. And the society and the environment, that is the critical part for social innovations.
What do you think is one design that came too early and we're not ready for it right now, but maybe if it came sometime later in the future, it'd be more relevant?
Right now. For example, let's say some of the technology innovations that I keep reading about as fantastically new cutting-edge innovations. We may not be ready for those. For example, I'm just picking up one. Google came out with a quantum chip,
Yes, I've read about it.
Zillow or something like that, right? Or Willow. The Willow chip, according to Google's claim, is a chip processing based on quantum movement of atomic particles, right? That can process things trillions of times faster than the current chips, the current computers. That's a massive, technological innovation. They came out with a chip. Now, what do I do with it, right? So it may not have any immediate application because it's very difficult to apply it to make something work trillion times faster than today, right? So that's an example of an innovation that came to. I mean, it came. I wouldn't call it too early. It is a good innovation, but its application will have to wait for a long time.
In your description of design, you had mentioned the environment. And I really like that because oftentimes when we're mapping out stakeholders for a design process, it's easy to gloss over invisible stakeholders.
Yeah.
So do you think that focusing on these invisible stakeholders is equally as important as focusing on the main ones that you're designing for? What are your thoughts on that?
Not equally important. I think you should create some kind of a diffusion map, right? One of the tools that we can use for that is and a sort of a concentric map. In the center, you put all the most significant stakeholders, the primary stakeholders.
We actually did something like this. Onion skin.
And that go that way. Right? On the periphery, you still have stakeholders, but still less relevant or kind of you're using the word hidden stakeholder.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So that's the importance.
So prioritize it.
That way.
Morally, shouldn't we also be looking at the environment, especially as a generation that's not leaving behind a physical mark except for, ruining forests?
Yeah.
As a young designer, should we maybe look at that more responsibly?
Yeah. I think because of the challenges that we have in the world today, you should put more emphasis on that. Right? That's where the young designers come in. They can you can put more emphasis on those factors, which are real factors that affect the problem now.
So now we'll be moving into a little true or false segment.
A little game for you to play.
So we'll be giving you a statement. You say true or false, and you explain why.
So the first statement is maintaining structure is more conducive to design than creativity.
True.
Why?
Because if you differentiate between design and creativity, design needs to be solved based on a need and based on some value that it brings. Creativity can be any expression of creative activity, right? So which can be done in much more organic ways and no structure needed, more intuitive it can be, creativity. You can get up in the morning and say, I've got a wonderful idea and I've created that idea and move on with it, right? Need not have a structure. Whereas in design, you need to, that's your question.
Yes.
The design, you need a structure. Need a structure to, what is the problem? what are the insights that I need to take care of to solve that problem? What are the ideas that I have? What are the most important ideas that I have? So there's some kind of a structure needed to make the design work.
And do you think these structures allow enough room for creativity to still exist freely?
The structure and intuitive creativity. Creativity is such a broad word. Design your creativity and anything else. So I would change the word to intuitive creativity versus design, structured design. If that is the case, there has to be a balance. It's not that one is better than the other. Nobody is advocating that. Both are needed. There has to be a balance depending upon the project that you're working on, or problem you're facing, right?
I think that's a balance all of us are like really working on.
But also, what about the warmth to a project? Like the second you start moving towards a more methodical process over a creative process, where the warmth and the emotion behind it kind of decreases, I guess. Warmth. The warmth of the project.
Warmth of the project. Yeah. Sometimes the intuitive process can be very exciting.
Yeah.
You can think about any intuitive idea, and sometimes the structure process can be rigorous, tiring, and drain out a lot of energy, right? Because if you have to do 2-3 days of research and analysis, and that is there. That's part of the method.
And it makes it more clinical also so it's the same process again, and you're so removed from the context.
You can get bored, so those are challenges that you have to bring in, but you have to think about that as in relation to the benefit.
Yes. But I do feel like the connect that you feel to a project also comes a lot before you even start working on it. When you pick up a problem, like with the project that my group did, we were all very emotionally invested in this one eatery.
Yes.
And after we went through the design process, we were pretty, happy with the outcome that we came up, and we felt like we did, justice to.
For us, it was kind of the opposite. We went into it wanting to help the auto drivers. But as we went on, we realized that this is a very large problem that as college students, we can't really deal with it because there needs to be policy change. So we kind of got so detached from it because there was nothing we could do, that it became such a clinical process. We were just doing what we had to do. We stopped interacting with them. We stopped putting in any effort. It was only after we had a proper conversation with our stakeholders that we got back into the flow of it, and we tried to figure out our own way to do it. It's interesting that we have two completely different outlooks on like the same project.
Same project, yeah, that's interesting. But in any case, the project, if it's a student project, you can take these different approaches. Imagine it's a real project. You're actually working for the auto industry as a designer, and they are your client, and they want your ideas to be implemented, right? That takes on a different scale altogether, right? There you have to really, you cannot take decisions on setting aside your, work, rigorous work, because that is needed to create the right solution, the credibility for, and also justify your implementation, right? So much more tough.
So the next true or false statement: people connect more to data than they do to stories.
False, in a sense, but I would really say that if the stories are data-based, there will be more connection. But if you look at stories alone, people connect to stories because that's the intuitive nature and how we think, how we behave, right? And data is hard to understand, and people may not know the value of data when they see it. But there's a little bit of connection problem there because of the administrator for understanding it.
It's interesting how you said stories should be data based. Do you think about it when you're maybe presenting to someone? For you, is it more you have a set of data and you're trying to make a story out of it to make it engaging for them? Or is it you have a story and now you need data to evidence it?
No, actually, in the kind of project that I had worked on, where the most value is have some good data. Good data means, for example, set of principles or set of insights that are really important for the project. That is my data, right? So by looking at the principles of insight, you can create a story on the most important principles and insights. You can create a story based on that data.
Yeah.
Which works most beneficially, because you cannot start a story from Baku, right?
Okay.
So storytelling's an important part of design, I guess. A tool we should all learn how to utilize.
Yeah. That's it for this episode. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. I feel like we definitely learned a lot.
I hope you had a great time with us on Design Darshan.
Yes, thank you very much. I really enjoyed talking with you guys. Questions were really sharp and right on target, and enjoyed thinking about the answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you.